Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into a truly fundamental theological event, one that sits right at the very beginning of the human story, as recounted in the Quran. And it consistently generates, I think, a massive conceptual conflict for a lot of people. I'm talking about the command for the heavenly forces, the angels, to perform sexted to Adam.
It's an instruction that has always felt like a paradox, hasn't it? On the surface, if you take the most common religious definition, you end up tying yourself in a pretty difficult theological knot.
A huge knot.
Yeah, I mean, how could God command his purest, non-material servants to what? To worship a creature made of clay? It doesn't quite add up.
Right.
And this analysis we're drawing from today, it doesn't just untangle that knot. It basically argues that the knot was tied by centuries of linguistic restriction.
Exactly. We're working with a really profound analysis that argues for a complete conceptual shift. Because if we accept that modern literal interpretation, that sexte means physical worship, we immediately find ourselves in that bind.
There in that trap.
Yeah. Did God command his pure servants, the angels, to perform an act of adoration toward a mortal man, Adam? The source's answer is just. It's definitive.
Certainly not.
Certainly not. That reading, the source argues, creates a theological contradiction that really undermines the very principle of monotheism.
It has to. The challenge, and this is what's highlighted in the source material, it arises when we prioritize the literal word, the phus, over the intended operational meaning, which is the manna.
Oh.
When we treat these ancient concepts as static history rather than as, dynamic functions, we lose the core message. We lose the whole point about the human purpose.
And that is our mission today. We are going to dissect three core concepts. First, the action of sekte, or prostration. Then the causal event, ruh flemme, the breathing of the spirit. And finally, the identity of the melek, the angel. We're going to do this to reveal the true functional message about the relationship between humanity and, well, the entire universe.
And to do that, we need a very precise conceptual tool. We have to pay close attention to the metaphors and the relationship between the literal expression and the deeper truth.
Because if we fail to evaluate that interplay,
if we fail to do that, we risk turning one of the most important statements about human potential into just a quaint, unsolvable historical anecdote.
Right.
We need to go back to the source language, clean the lens of interpretation, and see what the command for sekte actually means.
Let's start right there then with section 1. Decoding the act of sekdes itself. For most of our listeners, sekaz instantly conjures that physical image, right? The forehead touching the ground in ritual prayer.
Of course, that's its most common usage today.
But what did the verbal root, sacid, fundamentally mean in classical Arabic, before its religious application narrowed it down so much?
This is the critical starting point. If you go back to the oldest, most fundamental Arabic dictionaries, the core meaning of the root sacid is far broader, and it's decidedly functional. It speaks primarily to hierarchy and command.
So not worship.
Not worship. The primary definition is TAPINMA, which is simply obedience.
Okay.
It also includes concepts like bash isme, which is bowing and submitting, and boyun isme, which means yielding. But the key functional definition, the one that really unlocks this, is birisinin emri altına girme.
Which means?
It means entering someone's command or coming under their authority.
Wow. So if we strip away all the centuries of religious convention, sehaste is essentially a command for obedience and submission to a defined authority. It doesn't matter if that authority is divine or, in this case, newly granted to Adam.
Exactly. It describes a status, not an act of adoration.
That's a huge distinction.
It's everything. And once you establish that foundation, the physical act follows logically. I mean, when you are entering someone's command, how do you show it?
You have to demonstrate it somehow.
You approach that entity with humility, and with respect. You have to show you're not arrogant, not resistant. And so the physical demonstration evolved from that.
So the physical act is a symbol of the functional reality.
A symbol of the submission. Approaching the entity, bowing the head to the ground, placing the forehead on the soil. This was the most graphic, the most unambiguous physical sign of absolute submission to authority.
It's a performative acknowledgement of command then, not a spiritual plea. It's like a general saluting a higher-ranking officer or a nation signing an instrument of surrender. It's a functional acknowledgement of a new status.
Perfectly put. But your question is the right one. How did such a broad functional concept get reduced to such a specific ritual movement?
Yeah, how did that happen?
Well, this is a pattern we see across a lot of religious terminology. The source argues that the word's meaning was later restricted, within religious culture. It's the same thing that happened with the word salat.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. In its fundamental expansive meaning, salat just means connection or support. It denotes a sustained link to the divine. But over time, in religious practice, it became exclusively associated with namaz.
The ritual, structured prayer, performed 5 times a day.
Exactly. So when that narrowing occurs, when the general function becomes restricted to one specific ritual, the operational meaning gets lost. The same thing happened with sekte.
It was put into a box.
A very small box. It was confined solely to the act of placing the forehead on the ground in prayer. And so when later generations read the ancient text with that narrow lens, they forced a restrictive and often contradictory interpretation onto the creation narrative.
Of course. They assumed the command was for worship because that's the only context where they ever use the word.
That's it. So the core conclusion here, the takeaway, is that when the Quran commands Adam sekte edin, perform sekte to Adam, as you find in Baqarah 34 and Araf 11, it cannot mean show worshipful behavior.
It has to mean something else.
It must be understood as an imperative. Adam tat edin.
Obey Adam.
Obey Adam. This single linguistic shift, it cleans up the entire theological dilemma instantly. It transforms the whole narrative from one about impossible worship to one about a divine mandate and a new structural organization for the cosmos.
So let's apply this new lens directly to that verse, Baqarah 34. Then, when we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, they all prostrated except Iblis. He refused and was arrogant, becoming one of the deniers of truth.
Right. So with our new understanding, Iblis's refusal wasn't an act of heresy against God by refusing to worship. I mean, that would imply God was commanding polytheism, which is impossible.
Like the ultimate sin.
The ultimate sin. His sin was one of insubordination, arrogance. He refused to submit to the authority that God had just established. He refused to enter Adam's command.
So his refusal broke the new cosmic structure.
It did. Iblis's crime, then, was structural. He rejected the new chain of command.
But that raises an even more critical question, doesn't it? I mean, why was Adam given this unprecedented authority in the first place? The command for the entire universe's forces to submit to him. That must have been fully justified somehow.
Had to be.
And that transitions us perfectly into Section 2, the justification, the gift of the Spirit, or Ruach Phlim.
This is truly the key, the linchpin of the entire analysis. The command for obedience, the sectus, is explicitly and directly justified by God breathing his spirit, ruhunden uflamesi, into Adam.
So one causes the other.
It's a direct cause and effect relationship. The obedience is conditional, and it's necessary because of this prior bestowal of functional capacities.
Yeah.
You see this structure in verses like Nisa 28 and Sad 72. God doesn't just command the angels, he provides the rationale.
He gives the why.
He says, when I have proportioned him and breathed into him of my spirit, then fall down to him in respectful obedience. The command follows the infusion of the Spirit. It is contingent upon it.
Okay, so we have to be extremely clear about what this breathing of the Spirit signifies.
Yeah.
It's obviously not literal air, right?
Right. The source vehemently rejects that literal idea, of an air-like substance or a piece of God being transferred. No. Instead, this is the bestowal of God's own functional attributes, his sifat lara, upon humanity.
Functional attributes.
These attributes are the essential hardware and software that enable Adam to function as the vice-regent, as the one who is actually worthy of command.
So what exactly are these highly specific functional attributes? What qualifications do they grant humanity that justifies the submission of all other forces?
They're carefully categorized in the source. First, you have the foundational senses and intellectual attributes. These are necessary just for basic interaction and processing information.
Things like hearing and sight.
Exactly. Ishidi hearing, gurme sight, and wushin masat. These are the inputs. But then, more critically, you have the executive attributes. These are the ones that actually confer command and dominion.
Okay, what are those?
Akul, which is intellect or reason. Iraid, which is will or choice. Kudret, which is power or capability. And hawk.
Hawk is usually translated as creation, isn't it?
It is, but in this context, the source defines it not as creation from nothing, but as organization, art, and regulation. The word is düzenleme, the ability to organize and structure things.
Let's just pause on those executive attributes because they seem absolutely critical. Akul, reason, and Iraid, will. That's what separates, say, a complex machine from a master engineer, right?
Precisely. Akul, or reason, provides the means to analyze the environment, derive principles from it. It's what enables scientific discovery and technological control. Lariat or will is the freedom to choose how to use that knowledge, to build or to destroy, to command justly or to oppress. And kudret is the physical and intellectual capability to actually execute those choices.
And hawk, redefined as organization and regulation, duzenlam. That ties directly into the vice-surgeon role, the halophasy role. A vice-surgeon's job is to manage, to regulate, and to organize the systems placed under their command.
You've got it. Adam isn't just a smart operating system. He has the ultimate administrative privileges, but only if he activates that specific code. The verses on the creator's craftsmanship in Surah Sekde, verses 7 through 9, they really solidify this process. It talks about starting the creation of man from clay, then giving him an appropriate form, tesfayedib, and breathing into him of his spirit.
The concept of tesfai, giving him an appropriate form. That's critical, isn't it? It means the physical structure itself was refined to be capable of handling those attributes. The clay body was tuned, calibrated, or finalized to house reason, will, and organizational capacity.
Yes. The physical vessel was perfected, and then the functional attributes were loaded. It's a two-step process. And the scripture then often reflects on humanity's ingratitude, given the richness of these gifts, the faculties of thought, intellect, and emotion.
So the profound point is this. The finished product Adam, endowed with reason, will, and the power to organize, is the only entity worthy of being obeyed by the cosmic forces.
The only one. And this analysis hinges entirely on what the source calls gerekselendir.
Okay, that's a new term.
It is. It refers to the methodological necessity of reading the Quran by linking cause and effect, justification, conditionality. If we miss the link between the ru'uflame and the sekte, the obedience, we miss the entire point of human authority.
It sounds like an indispensable methodological tool.
It is. If we treat the Quranic statements as just isolated facts rather than as interconnected conditional laws, we fall into some very serious errors. The source provides some really clear examples of this breakdown.
Let's discuss the first one. It relates to the Israelites in Baqarah 47. The verse states they were made superior to the nations Aumleri Ustin Kalinmasa. Now, if you read that in isolation,
you might conclude, as many have, that they were created inherently superior, genetically, racially superior.
But what does the gerekselendirme, the justification principle, reveal?
It reveals that the superiority was conditional. It was conferred, not inherent. They were made superior because of the favor of the revelation, the Torah, and the unique blessing of being the companions of Moses during these pivotal historical moments.
So it was tied to the nimet, the religious and historical advantage they were given.
Which required adherence. Their status was a result of a divine favor that necessitated responsibility. If you break that cause and effect link, if you remove the conditionality adherence to the revelation, you are left with a very dangerous and inaccurate misconception.
The idea that they were somehow ontologically superior to all other people.
Which is exactly what contradicts the core Quranic ethos, that all superiority is based on piety and action, not on lineage. The link is the message. Break the link. You break the message.
Okay, and the second example emphasizes how this methodology impacts our relationship with the scripture itself. This is from Baqarah 121.
Yes. That verse speaks of those given the book. The crucial conditional clause is that they truly believe in it only if they recite and follow it properly. Hakila tilavet ederler.
A common simplified translation might just read, those to whom we have given the book recite it with proper recitation, and they truly believe in it.
Which sounds like a descriptive statement, doesn't it? They have the book, and hey, they happen to believe in it. It sounds descriptive, not conditional.
Right.
But the gerekselendir methodology reveals the true conditional mandate. Belief is not automatic just because you possess the physical text. True, saving belief is activated by the proper following and implementation, the tilavet, of the text in your life.
So if they don't follow it properly,
then by implication, they are denying it. The message is that the Quran only functions as a source of faith, guidance, and power when it is actively followed and applied.
This is a powerful methodological interlude, and bringing it back to Adam. Just as those blessings are conditional, the universe's obedience is conditional. Adam isn't obeyed because he's a physical man, but because he possesses and is expected to activate the functional attributes of the Ruh.
Absolutely. If he does not activate those attributes, if he acts without reason, without will, without organizational ability, the justification for the angel's submission just evaporates.
The obedience is based on capability, not privilege.
That's the law, which means with that structure established, we are now ready to tackle the entity that was commanded to submit in the first place.
We have to move to section 3, redefining the angels, the melek. Because if sekbi is now obedience, then the nature of the entity performing the obedience must be large enough in scope to justify the grand scale of that command.
And this redefinition is where the metaphorical reading truly shines. The term melek itself, it's derived from key Arabic roots. One is mokiyet,
meaning dominion or ownership,
and the other is melek, meaning faculty or ability. This instantly moves the concept beyond, ethereal beings with wings.
So the fundamental meaning of melek signifies force, power, authority, and dominion. It describes an operational force under command, not necessarily an independent spiritual personality.
Exactly. The term melek is used to describe all forces, whether they are abstract or concrete, that operate under God's command in the heavens and the earth.
All forces.
All of them. Therefore, when the command is given for the angels to obey, it is a command to the entire operational system of the cosmos.
That is a massive conceptual leap. So when we recite the traditional statement of faith, amantu billahi wa malaikatihi, I believe in God and his angels, it means far more than believing in some invisible beings.
It means internalizing the belief that God is the sole owner and master of all powers throughout the universe. It's an acknowledgement of divine sovereignty over the very mechanics of existence.
Though belief becomes an acknowledgement of physical and metaphysical reality, not just spiritual dogma.
That's the idea.
Okay, so let's apply this radical redefinition to the physical world. If the angels are the forces under divine command on earth, what specific operational powers does the source argue this concept must include?
The list becomes immediately practical and maybe a little surprising. It includes the forces that facilitate our very existence and organization. Things like rizgar, wind, electricity, yechekimi, gravity, and the atmosphere itself.
Wait, hold on. Electricity is an angel. Gravity is a force commanded to submit to me. That is a profound recontextualization. It completely grounds the spiritual narrative in physical science.
It does.
It turns the creation story into a statement about the laws of physics.
And it extends even further. The source states that all plants and animals, all living and non-living powers and forces, are encompassed within this concept of melek.
Why?
Because they operate under God's command and authority. They are the instruments of divine will in the physical world. They are functioning forces that must, under God's command, yield to the human intellect.
It's fascinating that the source points out how this expansive view sometimes surfaces in folk wisdom, right?
Yep.
Even when the formal theological definition has narrowed so much.
Yes, the concept of hoc refania popular understanding sometimes reflects this deeper truth. They cite the example of people treating essential livestock like cows and sheep with extreme respect, viewing them with a kind of melek eye.
What does that mean, a melek eye?
It's an intuitive recognition that these creatures are productive forces of nature. They are operating under a higher command, and they deserve respect because they are functioning elements of the universal order, not just random resources to be abused.
And this isn't some purely contemporary or, modern secular interpretation being overlaid on the text. There are respected classical scholars whose work aligns with this functional reading of melek.
Absolutely. The source makes a point to reference El-Malala Hamdi, a highly renowned Turkish exegete from the early 20th century. In his commentary on Surah Baqarah, he explicitly included electricity and wind in the concept of melek.
Wow.
This shows that the interpretation of angels as powerful forces, as kuvet, has roots in deeper Islamic scholarship, even before the scientific age fully articulated what those forces were.
That provides crucial historical validity to the functional approach. It's not a radical break from tradition, but maybe a return to a broader understanding that got lost.
Perhaps. And beyond the physical forces, the source also includes abstract forces, for example, communication tools.
How does that work?
Melek also encompasses abstract communication tools, or powers, iletishim araslare kuveler, that transmit revelation and convey knowledge between God and his prophets. These are the abstract mechanisms of cosmic communication operating at immense speed and precision.
And we see this connection to power reinforced when we look at the specific description of the archforce, Gabriel or Sabrail.
Yes. Gabriel is not just a polite messenger. In the Takfir Surah, he is described as Zikuvetin Ashimikin,
which means
a being endowed with strength, established firmly near the owner of the throne. Or, put another way, granted immense power and established near the seat of ultimate authority. This reinforces the idea that the highest order of angels are forces, kuvet, granted specific immense executive power to carry out the most critical divine commands.
they are the supreme operational directors of the universe.
You could say that.
Okay. We have completed the linguistic surgery on all three conceptual pillars. Sektevet is functional obedience. Melek is every natural and abstract force. And the command for Sekti is justified by the functional attributes of the Ru bestowed upon Adam.
The stage is set.
Now we move to section 4, the grand synthesis and modern implications. This is where the theological past meets the geopolitical present.
And this is the moment the narrative shifts from a theological event to an operational law of, well, physics and sociology.
So let's connect the threads clearly. The command for the Melek,
The Earth's natural and abstract forces and powers,
to Segde,
to obey and submit.
to Adam.
To humanity, endowed with functional attributes like reason and will.
It all means one thing. The operational systems of the entire Earth are mandated to enter the command of humanity.
That's it. This is the cosmic job description for the human species. To be the controller, the steward, the master of the planet's forces. But, and this is the most important part, as we established in Section 2, this obedience is absolutely conditional.
It's not a free pass.
Not at all. The Earth's powers will only submit if humanity activates and uses the capabilities granted by the Spirit. Specifically, the intellectual and executive faculties of akal, intellect, bilgi, knowledge, ireid, will, and düşünme, thought.
So we have the ultimate administrative passwords, but we have to actually type them in. Gravity, electricity, the atmosphere, even the cycles of life. These angels are waiting for a rational, knowledgeable, capable human commander to organize them.
That is the ultimate message delivered to every single human being. If you, the listener, use the intellect and the attributes entrusted to you, which indeed establish you as God's vicegerent, his helafesi, on earth, then the entire universe, all the forces of the earth and sky, will enter your command. You will achieve dominion and mastery.
This interpretation transforms the ancient narrative into a universal law governing civilization. And it sets up a very stark binary choice for every society on Earth, based entirely on its intellectual practice.
There are two distinct and inevitable paths, and they're based entirely on how humanity chooses to utilize the functional attributes of the Ru.
Okay, let's look at path 1, the activation of intellect. What are the consequences if a society adheres to the divine mandate and activates its akal and its ireid?
If a society uses its intellect to sustain life, to solve problems, to organize itself efficiently, remember Hawk, and to pursue knowledge, bilgi, then the forces of the earth and sky will, by divine law, submit to it.
And the result?
That society will achieve global mastery and sovereignty. They fulfill the conditions of the Sekde command. They become the commander.
And what about path 2, the abandonment of intellect? If societies choose to live and believe without relying on or properly activating their functional intellectual attributes, what is the consequence?
The consequence is absolute and severe. By failing to use the intellect, they forfeit their claim to command. The source points to Yunus Surah 100, arguing that such intellectual negligence dooms them to a despicable life. Ashalik bir hayata.
Despicable in what way?
They fall into servitude, intellectual and physical stagnation, and exposure to imperialism. They become subject to the very forces and people they were meant to command.
This is a devastating conclusion. It turns a historical narrative into a continuous self-fulfilling prophecy about the rise and fall of civilizations. The universe obeys their rational, willful master.
And this brings us to the source's highly pointed and current observation regarding modern global power dynamics. The analysis presents this as a direct, functional result of this theological law, and it's important we report it clearly and impartially.
Okay. Let's discuss that parallel, making sure we attribute the viewpoint precisely to the analysis we are studying. The source contrasts two global blocks based on their dedication to the functional attributes of the Ru, specifically reason.
It does. On one side, the source observes the West, or the Batu Dünyası. This analysis argues that the West sustains its life through reason akya hayatina idametaran.
So the argument is that by making intellectual rigor, scientific method, and organizational capability the core drivers of their societal advancement, they effectively activated the gifts of the Ru.
That's the argument, yes.
And the functional result of that, according to this analysis, is predictable based on the Sekte command we've been discussing.
The result is that, by operating the functional attributes gifted to Adam, the West has become the current ruler of the Earth. They have mastered the forces of nature harnessing electricity, defeating gravity, organizing complex systems, which have consequently entered their command. The natural forces have submitted to the rational mind.
And for the other group mentioned in the source, the Eastern and Islamic societies.
The source argues that these societies, Dozu ve İslam toplumları, have, historically and currently, distanced themselves from reason. It uses the phrase, running away from intellect, akıldan adeta kaçarkasına uzaklaşan.
And by choosing not to activate that core mechanism of the divine spirit, the intellect, the will, the power to organize, they suffer the consequential divine law.
Which is?
They are subjected to that despicable life. Intellectual slavery, imperialistic methods. Their failure to command the forces, the melek, means they are ruled by those who do command them.
The analysis posits this not as a divine punishment in the traditional sense, but as an inevitable, mechanical outcome of neglecting the conditional law of vicegerency.
It is an incredibly functional, if unsettling, reading of ancient scripture. It recasts a mythical event as a universal law of cause and effect, where spiritual command is directly and functionally linked to active intellectual application.
Right.
The message is raw and immediate. You want to achieve global mastery. Use the mind God gave you, and the forces of the world will obey.
The human drama, in this view, is not about waiting for salvation. It's about claiming dominion through the rigorous application of intellect and will. That really is the encapsulation of this entire synthesis.
This deep dive has been a massive journey of redefinition. Just to recap for everyone listening, we took the linguistic journey and redefined sexdedity as functional obedience and submission.
Not worship.
We redefined melek as all natural and abstract forces, from gravity to electricity. And we understood that this command for obedience is conditional. It's contingent upon humanity activating the functional attributes of the spirit reason, will, knowledge, and organization.
We move the narrative from a mystical history to an operational manual for achieving civilization, where success or failure is measured by intellectual application.
And before we close, this discussion about structure and function, it immediately raises another critical question, doesn't it? Especially regarding the identity of the one who refused the command.
Iblis.
We noted that Iblis, or Satan, refused the command to obey Adam. So, given our new understanding that a melek is often a force or a function, what does this imply about Iblis's identity?
It's the logical next question. If gravity and wind are functional angels, the question naturally follows. Is Iblis a concrete ontological being, or is he also a force or a function kuvet bir gus sahibi bir function that operates in the universe?
A force of what?
Well, the source notes that the Quran itself speaks of Iblis being among the angels. This raises the profound possibility that he might be the functional force of arrogance, of refusal, or of the intellectual and willful denial that humans carry within themselves, the very thing that prevents the universe from submitting to them.
That structural resistance to the divine order, that's what you should ponder until next time.
Go deeper. Stay curious.